Hey everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk It Out, the best podcast to ever be submitted through Canvas. I'm your host, Logan Jean. I figured we just get into it and talk about it. So today's topic might be a little off tempo for what we normally do, but I enjoy the topic, so I figured we'd talk about it. I recently watched Watch Mojo's How Geek Culture Became Pop Culture video, and for a moment they mentioned how the X-Men were created to symbolize discrimination that was going on in the US around the time that they were created. And I figured, considering my name being Logan after James Logan Howlett, or how you guys may know him as Wolverine or Weapon X, I figured this is a great topic to discuss. Not only that, but also considering how I am black, and I realized that there were some parallels within how the X-Men are treated and how people of color are treated in America. So I figured we'd dive into it and expand upon the topic a little bit. I figured we'd start with a little bit of history for those of you that don't really know who the X-Men are, just have seen Hugh Jackman shirtless having knives come out of his hands. So the X-Men, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1963, which happened to be right in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. At the time, racism, segregation, fight for equality was, pretty big in the news. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were inspired and, wanted to tell a story that reflected how people of color were being treated at the time. So they came up with an idea for a world or a group of people called mutants that were born different. They didn't get to choose their powers, but were different from the rest of humans or humanity. Obviously, because they were different, they were hated and feared and discriminated against by everyone who seemed to be quote-unquote normal. But their hate seemed to be somewhat inconsistent. Now, while they openly and willingly hated, yes, I say hate, even though it's a strong word, openly and willingly hated X-Men, people born with the X gene specifically, other mutants in Marvel were seen as heroes or greatly accepted. For example, Spider-Man caused genetic mutation, obviously after, he was born, when he was a teenager, but still technically a mutant. You may not see it visibly, but he has powers. The X-Men were born with their abilities, but still hated by people. Fantastic Four got their powers after they were adults, but seen as heroes by most, I should say. Not all, but most. Lee and Kirby not only showed how mutants were treated similarly to people of color, but they also included heroes or advocates for the community in different ways. For example, they represent Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with Charles Xavier, the bald guy in the wheelchair that could read minds, who had more of a peaceful approach, wanting mutants to live with humans peacefully and together, going about it by creating the team that we know, the X-Men. But Magneto, a friend of Charles Xavier's, had more of a rough and forceful approach. He had a similar belief system to the great Malcolm X, believed that mutants needed to fight back and protect themselves and make a place for themselves, because it's obvious humans weren't going to accept them willingly, so they had to do it themselves. Professor X states that he had a goal with creating the X-Men, not only in opening a school to help young mutants learn to control, accept, and harness their abilities, but also give them an outlet to show humans that mutants are good and they're not as bad as they're chalked up to be. They wanted to help people, even the people who disliked their existence. For all the years that there's been any form of X-Men media being posted, whether it's comics or TV shows or the movies that most people may know about, there's a consistency in the amount of hate and discrimination that mutants get. No matter how many times they may save the world or how many people they help, it just seems to be like humans, the ones without the X gene, will consistently see them as evil in their society. I feel like Magneto's approach was understandable because Magneto himself has survived the Holocaust. He is a Holocaust survivor. He understands what it's like to be hated simply because you were born. So while I don't agree with his take on, yes, people need to fight back and everything, I feel like they should have their own place. All mutants should have their own place where they won't be hated, where they could come together and live peacefully, accept who they are, accept their abilities, and just be themselves without being scared of walking down the street and being yelled at because you weren't born the same as everyone else. While I don't like to get dark on this podcast, I don't like to get too somber or dark, this is a topic that really resonates with me as a black man, because living in America, I have had my own personal experiences when it comes to discrimination and racism, and seeing that parallel happen in a form of media that I love and I've enjoyed since I was a child, it touches me. It touches my heart. While the violence is not something I enjoy ever, it's something that I can relate to. The hate and the discrimination, it's relatable, and I find it encouraging, to see the X-Men that want to, continue and fight and protect people who aren't able to protect themselves the way that they are. But honestly, I would understand if they just decided to go somewhere else and log away and not want to protect the people who consistently hate them, Well, I want to thank y'all for tuning in for this episode of Let's Talk About It. Again, I'm your host, Logan Jean, and like the great Cyclops always says,
to me, my X-Men